are well over 1,000 guns in the COD franchise, so it's no wonder there are probably a handful out there that slip past your radar even if you played every game. I'm ornery, and this is the most forgotten gun in every Call of Duty. To make things a little more simple, I'm excluding DLC guns and supply drop guns, but any primary or secondary outside of that is eligible. COD 4 actually has a lot of guns that were overlooked, but the one that comes to mind when I think of Modern Warfare is the G3. The G3 is unique in that it's one of 2 assault rifles in this game that are semi-automatic. It was actually pretty decent, and as far as I know, the fire rate cap was something ridiculous, if not like non-existent, meaning if you wanted to go turbulent with your trigger finger, you could shoot this thing as fast as you wanted. I think this was also a gun that owners of modern controllers were all about. Being a pretty decent option, the reason this one is forgotten is because it was massively outshined and overshadowed by a little gun known as the M16. We all know that this was a medium and long range destroyer and was an easy one burst. So when you can one tap at any range with the M16, there's just no reason to use a gun that requires a 2 or even 3 shot and required some actual aim as well. Surprisingly enough, this was probably the hardest entry on this list. However, I had to go with the Arisaka because just like the G3, it was outshined by other guns in its class. Also, I think a lot of players got familiar with this game's arsenal through playing zombies. I know that was the case for me at least. And it felt like I never had opportunity to use the Arisaka in that mode because I'm pretty sure it was exclusive to Shino Numa. And on top of that, as far as snipers went in World at War, this was competing with the PTRS, Kar 98, Springfield, and my personal favorite, the Mosin Nagant. The gun was great and statistically probably better than a lot of the other options at the time, but for some reason saw a lower pick rate. Also, in all the World War II Call of Duty games, the arsenal, I feel like there's just like a ton of iconic guns that are honestly borderline famous even for non-Call of Duty fans, so that's the main reason why I think this selection was so difficult. MW2 had some heavy hitters for iconic and memorable guns, but there is an entire category that I feel like gets neglected here because of all the stiff competition, and those are the LMGs, and specifically the MG4. I genuinely want to know what everyone's playtime with the MG4 looked like specifically. This thing just never got used. And unlike the guns before this entry, I do think that this one is actually pretty bad. With extremely low damage and not the best handling, there was really just no reason to use this gun, and if I could, I would actually use the entire LMG section of Modern Warfare 2 for this entry if possible. I already know that a lot of people are going to be mad at this next one, but I never said anything about killstreaks as weapons for eligibility. The Grim Reaper was a killstreak that actually had no guarantee way of securing it no matter how many kills you could get. It was only available in a care package, but once you got the care package, it only had a chance of appearing and not even like no way of guaranteeing whatsoever. That means that this killstreak was never equipable, already limiting the playable time players had with the gun. Anyways, enough history, let's talk about the launcher itself. It was a semi-auto launcher, which, correct me if I'm wrong, might be the very first one that we've ever seen in the COD franchise, and it had an insane one-shot radius, a goofy looking scope, and was even good for destroying other kill streaks. Also, what's worth mentioning is the fact that this launcher had an insane 12 rockets in total, which could easily result in 12 kills if you played your cards right. This would later be replaced with the War Machine in the later entries, but to me, the Grim Reaper will always be my favorite, but definitely not the first gun when you think of when you hear Black Ops 1. I'm going to be completely honest here, Modern Warfare 3 is one of my favorite multiplayers, and I do not remember this gun ever existing. So what if I told you there was not one, but 2 revolvers in Modern Warfare 3? We all remember the 44 Magnum, but what about the MP412? As far as I'm concerned, this gun is literally the exact same as the Magnum, but maybe has like a little more range. But the fact that this gun exists alongside the Magnum just made absolutely no sense. I think a lot of people see the Magnum as like an older gun, and since this was Modern Warfare after all, they wanted to keep that old Magnum in the game while also bringing in a newer version. Let's also not forget that in Modern Warfare 3, you could have machine pistols as your secondary, so the likelihood of you picking a regular handgun in the first place is very slim, and the chances you chose the MP412 was even slimmer. Remember for Modern Warfare 2 when I said that LMGs are the most forgettable weapon class in the game? You could actually say that about just about any Call of Duty at this point, except for the modern ones. That being said, the QBB LSW in Black Ops 2 was a bullpup LMG that kind of felt like a little bit more like an AR rather than an LMG. It reloaded decently fast and had extremely fast fire rate, but very low damage. The result was a lackluster gun that was outclassed by just about anything else, and since it acted as an AR but couldn't fill the shoes of an AR since the actual assault rifles were all just flat out better, this was just a completely mid gun. And as I be doing research for this video, I found out that there is no headshot multiplier whatsoever, meaning headshots are the same as chest shots, which made absolutely no sense. Okay, if you weren't mad at me for using the Grim Reaper for Black Ops 1, you're probably gonna be mad at me for calling the Venom X the most forgotten gun in COD Ghosts. For a lot of people, COD Ghosts is the most forgettable game in the COD franchise, so most of the guns are forgotten in that regard. But in the Ghost DLC, there is a map exclusive gun being the Venom X. The Venom X was actually a gun exclusive to Extinction, but was later added to the multiplayer map Unearthed. If you blew up the support joints on the crane, it would lower the cab, and inside the briefcase was the Venom X. This was a grenade launcher-like gun that shot projectiles with your primary fire, then you could choose when to detonate them by pressing your ADS button, which also I'm pretty sure was the first time we've ever seen like this remote detonation system outside of C4. This was pretty broken, but I think was fairly balanced since when you died, the gun would disappear for the rest of the match and also didn't have much ammo to begin with. And on top of that, it was really easy to kill yourself if you weren't careful because of how crazy the explosion was. I think this is needless to say, but since next to no one even played or bought the DLC in Ghosts, barely anyone knew about this gun being in the game, making it very forgotten. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't play too much Advanced Warfare, so I don't have much to say about it, other than I know that for once in a Call of Duty, explosives and rocket launchers were not the play, which is why I'm selecting the Mayhem for the most forgotten gun in Advanced Warfare. When everyone can fly, jump, and boost around the map, the time on the ground is very limited, meaning the opportunity for use with the Mayhem was slim to none. Being a successor to the RPG, it did it no justice simply because of the game it existed and not because of the actual damage or handling values of it. This next one I think gets some brownie points for innovation and creativity. The P-06 is a burst rifle sniper rifle. Yep, you heard that correctly, a burst sniper rifle. It dealt 90 damage per shot, meaning no matter what, as long as 2 of your 3 shots landed, it would be a confirmed kill, and if only 1 of your 3 shots landed but was a headshot, it would also guarantee a kill. So take the COD 4 M16 and turn it into a sniper rifle, and that's pretty much what you had. I think when people are using a sniper, they want to, well, I guess use an actual sniper instead of an experimental and gimmicky gun. For that reason alone, this gun got completely overlooked. It was actually a really good option, but I think if it was the same exact gun, but maybe lumped in with the assault rifles or marksman rifles, if that existed back then, it would have seen a lot more use and appreciation at that. Similar to Advanced Warfare, this is another COD that I pretty much skipped and was also oversaturated by supply drop guns post-launch. The little I did plague, I had a vague memory of a gun that could split in 2, but was also a pretty solid mid-range option, being the Type 2. I thought this gun was good, and it really probably wasn't all that forgotten since it would also get a pretty big buff later on in its life cycle. But I think it's safe to say that just about every launch gun would be forgotten in this game because the amount of post-launch guns we got just oversaturated the entire gun list in this game. And for the most part, they were just way better options. Now, the sawed-off shotgun is an iconic firearm way beyond Call of Duty, but in World War II, they did this thing so dirty. Now, it's easy to remember that this is in the game because of how popular and recognizable this gun is, but I guarantee that once you proceed to the Expeditionary Division, and were finally able to use the sawed-off shotgun, you probably never used it again and deleted all memories you ever had with this thing because of how bad it was. You could maybe argue that this is the worst gun on this entire list and the sole reason it's forgettable. Having only 2 shots before needing a reload, you'll be lucky to get 1 kill with those 2 shots, which is usually the whole point behind small magazine capacity weapons, is balancing it off with high damage, but instead you just got neither of those with the World War II sawed-off shotgun. Black Ops 4 to me didn't have a lot of memorable guns, so I'm going to go through with a gun that was just awful downright, and that is the Spitfire. I actually played more Blackout than multiplayer in Black Ops 4, and this was the gun that you avoided at all costs and really just felt naked until you found literally anything else to use instead. Maybe this gun was a little better in multiplayer than I remember, but I did everything in my control to not use it. It was low recoil and low damage, and in a game where the TTK is really long, that just doesn't work out for you. Now, before you show up at my doorstep for calling the SCAR forgettable, hear me out. The SCAR is another iconic weapon for Call of Duty that was first introduced in the original Modern Warfare 2 and has seen a return several times. Well, I'm taking the same approach as the sawed-off shotgun with World War II, in that you were probably pretty excited to use this gun, but then once you did, you never picked it up again because of how bad it was, resulting in you forgetting it was ever in the game to begin with. I remember when Warzone dropped, I was pretty excited to use this because maybe it just fared better in Warzone rather than multiplayer, but unfortunately, it was still terrible. Also similar to the sawed-off shotgun, this gun's whole identity is low magazine size but high damage, but was still just an absolute pea shooter. If you never played Warzone, as far as I'm concerned, there was actually no reason to use this next gun. The M82 was a Barrett 50 cal like gun that had crazy damage but was held back by mobility and recoil. Now this, like most entries on this list, isn't bad, but if you're one-on-one with literally any other sniper in this game, by the time you fully ADS, you'll be dead, hence why it's forgotten. Moving to Warzone, this was actually a pretty good option if you wanted a semi-auto sniper that could one-shot and saw some viability, but even then was also outclassed by most other snipers at the time. Back to the World War II era, where once again we have a lot of iconic guns to compete with, and I'm pretty sure we got a ton of fictitious and fake guns with Vanguard, and I'm pretty certain that 3-round burst guns were just not a thing back in World War II, so that's the sole reason I'm putting the Itra burst here. I'm not one to complain about continuity, but this being so blatantly inaccurate is just a little annoying, and honestly like somewhat disrespectful. I feel like, I don't know why, but I just feel that way. But as far as the gun itself, it can one burst if you land all chest shots, but it was also pretty hard to control and didn't have the best time between shots. So overall, just not the best option. Now we're at back-to-back stinker entries on this list. COD had been on the decline, so once again, you could say this whole arsenal is forgettable, but there's one gun that seems redundant, and that's the SO14. This gun you would think is just like an M14, and it pretty much is, but when you remember that the EBR-14 also exists in this game, it makes no sense to have two very similar guns in this game. The only difference is one is essentially like the Timu knockoff name that actually doesn't exist in real life. I thought it was pretty bad, but you could actually use it in full auto, and the TTK was pretty insane, but still limited to a small magazine and high recoil. But overall, this is a gun that to this day I don't think I have leveled up past like 3. This one is also a redundancy issue that we've seen in COD the last few years, but in Modern Warfare 3, we have the WSP-9 and WSP Swarm SMGs that are this game's version of the Uzi, but then in the pistol category, there's the WSP Stinger, which is a machine pistol. And you guessed it, these weren't bad per se, but I think this really highlights how lazy and non-creative the devs have been the last 2 years with weapon design. I mean, why does there have to be 3 different variations of the Uzi in this game? I'll give them credit, they each function pretty differently, but like, why not at least slap a different package on the gun itself, just like change the way it looks? Or at least change the names. The Stinger actually had some time in the Warzone meta, with its akimbo version being a really good close range option before it was eventually nerfed into the ground. As far as Black Ops 6, I think it's just way too early to talk about any guns being forgotten, especially since camo grinding is at an all-time high and basically requires you to using every single gun, and honestly like a good bit at that. And also on top of that, I think like the weapon balancing is like somewhat okay. Like you can pretty much get by using like most guns in this game. If I really had to pick, I'd maybe say the Goblin. I mean, that gun just sucks if you're not playing hardcore. But wrapping things up, I want to know your all's opinion. There's some guns that are more forgotten than others for different games. Did I miss something? Definitely let me know down below. But if you want to hear me rank every single Black Ops game, or if live service ruined Call of Duty, click on screen now. Join my Discord if you're feeling crazy, and if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, and thank you so much for watching.